place to start. IDG was founded in order to bring forward a new asset class based on nature. The foundation of it is a new form of company, the natural asset company, which you have said obtains the rights to the ecological services that nature produces, and by extension is not only valuing that, but the underlying asset itself that produces these services. The central concept here is to deal with the problems that, we left nature out of the mainstream of our economy in the beginning. And that really has two parts. There's negative externalities, so the costs that are not borne, that we all recognize by the adverse effects in pollution, lack of destruction of biodiversity, a lack of economic opportunity, a variety of problems. And we're also very focused on the positive side. So if we could capture those positive externalities that are valued somewhere probably in 125 trillion a year. So nature's production of goods and services. And we could figure out a way to bring that into the mainstream and convert that natural asset and its productivity into financial capital and level the playing field so that we have the ability to look at the relative values of land use and ultimately the price signaling to the productions of goods and services. So the natural asset company would obtain the rights. It could be on natural areas. That could be to further conservation, to fund the management of conservation areas. It can be the rehabilitation or restoration of degraded landscapes. Another very key area for us working is in working lands. It's almost 50% of the land surface of the planet is devoted to agriculture, which sits at this nexus of, a loss of biodiversity, human health, certainly energy, water, and climate. And if we're to deal with some of the larger problems, we're going to have to keep what we have that's in a natural state, restore what has been damaged, and convert from largely extractive measures in our agricultural system to something that's sustainable and regenerative. And the third use case for this natural asset company would be hybrid lands. So that would include landscapes that could have even built infrastructure, protected areas, as well as working lands all in one. So a natural asset company would acquire the rights to those ecosystem services in a given landscape. We would value that using a ecosystem service valuation and appraisal, which is a well-established discipline of looking at the various ecosystem services. It could be carbon sequestration, freshwater production, food provisioning, genetic potential, aesthetic and cultural values, and assigning a financial value to that so that we can come up with the underlying asset value that is held as the primary asset of these natural asset companies. In order to do that, we developed a way of accounting for those so that the natural asset company and its equity would be priced first on whatever monetized revenues that would be under GAAP or IFRS and reported. And that can include ecosystem services that are monetized, like carbon credits or biodiversity credits, et cetera. But importantly, the majority of the ecosystem services and natural asset values are not monetized. And so we came up with a accounting framework, statements of ecological performance, that would look at these values of ecosystem services. You can think of it like the flow of ecosystem services being somewhat akin to a natural production or an income statement in the GAAP world. The asset value is the underlying asset that is able to produce those ecosystem services, as well as its intrinsic values. And then certain key indicators of the health of the underlying asset, things like biodiversity and ecological health. The concept then is to value those ecosystem services, whether they're monetized today, might be monetized in the future or not, capturing that equity value so that a traditional equity might look at price to revenue, price to earnings. We also want this asset class to be valued in price to ecosystem services and the underlying asset itself. It's important to capture all of the values of nature and this natural asset class. So its existence value, nature is valuable in and of itself, even transcending human use. Capturing the use values that we enjoy, the host of ecosystem services, and as well the option value of the future, the value of the potential to monetize those ecosystem services in the future, and also bequeathing value. What value is there to handing off a healthy, planet to the next generation? And as David mentioned, half of our economy is dependent or highly dependent on a healthy ecosystem. And I would argue maybe it's even more than that, because if we don't have a healthy ecosystem and a planet that's livable, there isn't an economy. And we also look at that 125 trillion of ecosystem services that are produced as the potential. So when we combine those, we realize this asset class is fundamental and really maps well with aligning the interests of financial creation of wealth, financial returns, and the conservation and conversion of our economy to one that's fairer, more resilient, and can truly be sustainable.